essential feature of the Eurocentric approach to Indian history is it presents a narrative of Indian history as the Europeans perceived it. There's a reason I use the word perceive. It's basically perception. The Eurocentric approach or the Eurocentric approach of writing Indian history is basically perception. And continuing to accept it as the true and authentic history of India. This is yet another feature, and it's not technically a feature, it's related to it. But I mean, it's been accepted as received wisdom for so many centuries that I had to mention it as a separate feature. And it is both a product and a consequence of colonialism. Now, how did this happen? Why did this happen? A few words in that. Until Europeans came to India first, some early 17th century. One of the first things they did, apart from getting into trade with us, is that they began to study our philosophy. They began to first study Sanskrit. The Germans did this first. They were perhaps the first Europeans to do such an extensive, in-depth study of Sanskrit as a language. And then they began to study Indian philosophy. And if you trace the history of that, and I think Breaking India has a pretty good account on this. Most of these, what later began to be called as mythology, had their origins as Sanskrit studies. And they established, the universities established separate Sanskrit departments, and even specialized and sub-specialized departments within the Sanskrit departments back then.
And missionary things also?
Yes, yes. I'm coming back. Now, what happened after that was, along with this trade thing, science and technology developed in Europe at a pretty amazing pace, and that directly enabled colonialism. Now, on the one hand, you have trade success, which made those countries wealthy. Then you had science and technology, which reduced space and time. And on the other hand, that in turn encouraged them to, become colonizers. Now, what happened after that? Once they became colonially successful, their studies in pretty much cultural studies, basically. I mean, you can't lie with science, and you can't use science to tell lies. So now, colonial success skewed the objectivity of cultural studies when they began to study, the history, culture, philosophy of India. It skewed that. I mean, they began to look at it from the perspective of a victor, from a superior perspective, right? I mean, it's like how we, say take a frog and dissect it. In the land, cut it open, dissect it. I mean, it's the same thing that we do it because we know that guy can't eat that. I mean, you have to just kill it. I mean, you do it at will. So it is pretty much from this perspective that we study Indian history. I'm sorry?
Sense of superiority.
Yes, yes. Now, when this happened, let's look at some major analysis of Indian history presented from, by wearing Eurocentric glasses, Eurocentric lenses, so to say, and which is still continued to be accepted as received wisdom. For that, let's look at the geography of undivided India, the territorial extent of undivided India, and compare it with Europe. Now you take off the Russian part of Europe, and you add geography of undivided India. It is the territorial areas of undivided India is almost the same or slightly larger than that of Europe. So what you mean is, you have a country which is as big as a continent, and you have a continent, a properly designated continent, which is split into tens of small countries, right? So this perspective is important because I will get to this later. And this has not changed even today. Today, you leave out Russia, the largest country in Europe happens to be Ukraine. And second largest is Denmark, which is what? As big as, say, Maharashtra.
If you take out Greenland, it's even smaller.
Yeah, Now, but the thing is, look at the great colonizers from Europe. You had Great Britain, which was number one there, and then you have France, and then you have Netherlands, and then you have Portugal, and Spain to a small extent. Question is, what was the extent of power each of these guys had? What maximum geographical territory they covered within Europe itself before they began to get out of Europe and colonize the rest of the world, right? And what does the fact that every single colonizer, England, France, Netherlands, every single nation of Europe, what is the fact that every single nation of Europe set their sights outside Europe? Tell us. What does that tell us? Now let's look at the scene. Now let's look at the scene in India. Let's start with the great Indian empires. The greatest Indian empire still was the Mauryan Empire, which covered a geographical territory of 50 lakh kilometers square. Yeah, that was the extent of Mauryan Empire. And then the Guptas. Their empire stretched from what was called Magadha, all of Bihar, covered all of North India, most of Maharashtra, all of Bengal, and most of the east coast of India. And then you have the Pala dynasty, which covered an area that stretched beyond Afghanistan there, and then it covered a total kilometer area of 46 lakh kilometers square. And it stretched all the way up to Andhra Pradesh, parts of Tamil Nadu, and again the east coast of India. And then you have the Shatavahana Empire, which included Maharashtra, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, and parts of Orissa, all of Madhya Pradesh, and stretched up to Mathura in the north. And we have the Gurjara Pratihara. Gujarat is derived from Gurjaras. So the Gurjara Pratihara Empire that equaled or rivaled the Gupta Empire in terms of geographical extent, territorial extent. And then you have the Charcha Empire, which included the entire region from Kaveri to Narmada. And then you have the Rashtrakuta Empire, which covered all of Karnataka, parts of Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, up to Kannauj in Nairobi. And then you have the Chola Empire, which covered most of the east coast, almost touching Orissa. And then it also spread its influence to Sri Lanka, Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, and Maldives. And not to mention Vijayanagar Empire. Now, this happened over, say, about almost 1,000 years. In the span of 1,000 years, we had these great empires within India. Now, you compare this with what I just told about European empires, territorial extent, the extent of their power, influence, in different ways, influence in different ways, culturally, militarily. Now, after the great empires, let's look at the smaller empires. You had the Senas, you had the Kalingas, you had Vakatakas, Harshavardhana, Paramaras, the Solankis, Eastern Chalukyas, Gangas, Eastern Gangas, Kalachuris, Yadavas, Kakatiyas, Pallavas, Cheras, Pandyas, Hoysalas, Kadambas, and even later, until the British took over the Marathas. Anybody counted the number of empires that's listed? Each of these guys spanned at least 3-4 states in terms of entire states in terms of territorial conquest that they had on the way. So the point is, both of these, both large and small empires, it encompass several large and area equivalent to several large countries of Europe, entire nations of Europe in terms of comparable geographical density. But what does the narrative tell us? What does the Eurocentric narrative tell us? None of these kings have received the extent of, for want of a better word, publicity, fame, or their rightful place in history compared to, say, the kings of conquerors of Europe like Napoleon, Julius Caesar, even Hitler, right? at the most, what extent of territory did these world conquerors actually capture compared to these folks? Now, let's look at another good example to illustrate this. All of us have heard of this guy called Himu, right? What do our history books tell us? Just Himu, we don't even know who he was. His real name was Hemachandra, and he wrested the control of Delhi from Muslim rule after about 300 or 350 years under Muslim occupation. Delhi was completely under Muslim occupation, and he was the one who wrested control of Delhi after such a protracted period of time. And not just that, he fought and won 22 consecutive battles, all against Afghan rebels. He was the one who kicked out Humayun and defeated Akbar, I think, at least twice before, the decisive Panipat battle. He was originally a fruit and vegetable vendor in the outskirts of Delhi. And through his sheer merit and his prowess, skill, etc., he rose through the ranks and he became what he became. In fact, his title was Hemachandra Vikramaditya. Vikramaditya is equivalent to Samrat, is equivalent to a supreme emperor. Now, how is he portrayed as? He's just mentioned, if at all he's mentioned because he lost in the first battle, second battle. Right? And he's got just him, and that's about it. He's portrayed as a rebel who ruled from there. Indeed, you must read, I highly recommend the book by K.K. Bharadwaj, who's written a book on Himu. It's called, he calls him the Napoleon of India. The title of the book is Himu, Napoleon of Medieval India. And of course, we all know what treatment Shivaji is doing, and he is also portrayed as a rebel. This brings us to an important point. There's a reason why, people like Shivaji, even Prithviraj Chauhan, these kind of people, their roles, their actual contribution is dimmed, so to say. And let's say it might be. Is tied to another point. And it is not a point as much as it's a charge, it's an accusation that the cause that frequent and perpetual infighting was one of the marked characteristics of Indian empires. And you can't deny that. It's true. The people looking just kept fighting with each other. It's true to an extent. But look at this. Let's look at the record. Who blamed and who made this charge? Again, the Europeans who gave us this analysis. But let's turn the tables back to them. What was the record of the book? Yeah, comparable to the same period, medieval. Let's look at it. The English hated the French, Irish hated the English, both Scottish and Irish people hated the English, Austria hated Italy, Hungary and Bulgaria hated each other, Portuguese hated the Spanish, Germany hated everyone.
Actually, it continues to this day. Even
Now, this is not to deny that there was infighting in India, but it is cited as the only reason for why India became subjugated and conquered. It's taken a very one-sided view of things. But then. And this charge was made after colonialism had deeply set in. Right? Because then these guys were busy fighting and trading, and they had no time to really come up with such theories. Now, by this time, by the time colonialism was completely, we kept losing because of those two. Let's acknowledge that also. By that time, what had happened was India was far from being in any shape to mount an effective attack. Okay? By the time the British had set in, India had just broken away from the Mughal rule. I mean, till Aurangzeb was alive. It was basically a battle of survival. And then, you slowly recovered the Marathas, and then later the warriors in Mysore, and rest of the guys in, what was guys in Bundelkhand? Yeah, those guys. Chandelas in Bundelkhand. Tiny eruptions of, rebellion all over till the Mughal Empire was not there. And it was rendered inconsequential. That was the time these guys with the military, superior military force, they had better weaponry, better equipment. And of course, these guys, they were good at, pitting Indians against each other. So this was a time that, it was kind of, India was right for it, so to say, and it got picked. And later, these theories evolved, we lost, British were able to easily take control because of, these guys were infighting, it's taking one side of the things. Yet this wrong diagnosis, or this one-sided diagnosis, is still perpetuating in history. Right? Then there's this other charge that why history in India, history writing in India as a discipline didn't evolve. One charge is that Indians didn't leave documented history, like the Europeans have done, say in America has done. But how much of that is true? Let's look at it. And this again is a point made by European scholars who wrote in history. Right? But did we leave any documents? What happened to those documents if we had really left any documentation? Let's look at that. Now you're talking about the history of a country that has seen a cultural and civilizational continuum for at least 5,000 years. The traditions that we preserve, we continue to follow today. The temple culture, the yagas, yajnas, havans, all these things can be directly traced back to when they were about 5,000 years back. What does that tell you about how you need to look at Indian history? Second point. Now, 5,000 years is a long time in any culture. How much of that history would have realistically survived? Now, if you look at the kind of tools and technologies and methods we have to preserve history, and you compare that to 5,000 years back. No, forget that. Compare that to just 100 years back. How much of it would have survived intact till the present day? Add to that the fact that pretty much on regular intervals we were plundered, large-scale destruction, etc., etc., etc. Even if we had large records, historical records, documents that we had actually written in such successive waves of invasion, how much of that, to what extent of it would have been actually preserved, right? One good example is we don't know how much of what we had, we lost in the destruction of the great university, Nalanda, or in the Vikramashila, Takshashila, right? Now, what if those things had been preserved? What would that tell you the full story?
We don't even have records of emergencies.
Okay. Okay. Yet another point, a related point. Now, this is a country which had attained excellence in almost every human endeavor: arts, music, dance, folk, painting, even Rangoli, for example, architecture, monuments, whatever. Right? Now, without having a written record, how can anybody build something? How could anybody build something without having a written record of basic scientific thing, mathematical formulas, for example? How do we build an Kailash temple? What does that do? The other point is that most Indian dynasties, whether large or small, they have actually left behind immense documentary evidence. Let's look at some of that. The Puranas, the Bhavishya Purana and Bhavishyottara Purana, two primary examples, they deal with the important historical episodes that happened. They talk about the Tushka invasion, Hunan invasion, in an embellished fashion, right? But you cut out all the embellishments, you will be able to piece together a history of that time when it was recorded. It was like a continuous chronicle that was continuously being updated. The Bhavishya Purana and Bhavishyottara Purana. For example, one good example why I am bringing up these two Puranas is because what happened in we should probably girls' school, I think, or college. One of the principal fathers of those guys said they wanted a translation of these two things, an authentic English translation, because they wanted to see if the mention of Christians coming into India was mentioned there, and if it was, in what way was it mentioned. Now, why they asked is the answer to that everybody in this room knows. Yeah. So, if this was the charge that where does it leave the charge that we didn't have anything documented?
The nice misconstruction of the two words Lecha and Mala.
Yeah. Now, the other documentary evidence that we've left behind, apart from Puranas, is Sthala Purana. For those unfamiliar with say Kannada or Sanskrit, Sthala means place. Now, how many of you have visited any of these ancient temples, historical temples? Most of you might have. And some of these temples still have pujas conducted, except those taken over by the ASI, where there is no puja. It's preserved as a monument. So there's no living tradition there. Now those temples, how many of you have visited those temples? And if you have, if you've spoken to the priest out there, he is a custodian of that temple's Sthala Purana, of the temple's history. Right? You ask him, he will tell you completely which Samvatsara, what year it was built, who built it, why was it built. To commemorate a victory, just some guy said, okay, this is a good spot to build a temple. Some God's blessing, build it, they build it. So doesn't this fall under the purview of history? It's a question we need to answer. That apart, you obviously have lots of royal inscriptions, numismatics, and temple and land grants, literary and poetic evidence. Examples are Vanavata, Charcha, and lots of Kalidasa's plays and his epic poetry, which makes good references for us to gain enough insight and authentic knowledge about the state of affairs during the Gupta time.
Still even the inscriptions on the temple walls.
Yes. A lot of the history has been reconstructed and unearthed from those inscriptions.
The Tanjavur Brihadeshwara temple has some real fabulous inscriptions. Just that no one's been able to discover that tamil also.
Absolutely.
Even this change of from what we call as old language, Hale Kannada or old Tamil to whatever is being in vogue right now.
That's right.
Lost that concept.
Apart from this, Indian history writing, it also included what we call the Vanshavali, or the generation or genealogy tree, like your family tree. Now, not very long ago, even 80 years back, you had these so-called wandering minstrels whose only job was to visit village to village, poor village to village, and tell prominent families their family tree. Like Jaideep's great grandfather, for example, was a chieftain of some village near Mangalore. And this guy would know his entire family tree and he would recite him his whatever good deeds of his ancestors.
Similar thing is done in the pandas in the places.
Everywhere, across India.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Whenever a person goes, they will tell that we are from this family and they will show.
Yeah.
Your parents, your grandparents came near this.
Can this also be considered as history writing? It's a question and answer. And you had Akhyanas, Upakhyanas, and Akhyayika. Basically, all three words basically it means the same. It's a description of actual events as they happen, right? And then you had Shamsis and Charitras, which is the life sketch of a person, and it can mostly be called hagiography. And this apart, you had proper historical chronicling as we know, from the time of, say, Harshacharita and Kashmir's Kalhana's Rajatarangini. It's the format of Rajatarangini and Harshacharita loosely resembles what the kind of history we write. And of course, you don't need to talk about much about Islamic history because, you know, so to say, it comes out much of Islamic history of India comes out from the horse's mouth by court historians. Yeah. After this, let's look at some consequences of what is before this is begun. So all this has been completely blanked out by adopting a completely Eurocentric approach of looking at events, right? And there have been consequences. And the Marxist takeover of the Indian history is, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's a very minor thing. The real battle, so to say, is to reclaim India's actual history. Because the adopting, Eurocentric history for so long, the next logical step, so to say, was the Marxist takeover. I mean, you already have a distorted view of Indian history. What these guys did was they just took it over and perverted